Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Jadi sesi kali ini kita akan lihat presentation para pelajar yang akan berkongsi ilmu bersama kawan-kawan bagi persediaan menghadapi final exam yang bakal tiba dalam sesi Dari Kita Untuk Kita. Jom kita tengok.
In this video, I'm going to share about subtopic 11.1, stress and strain. What is stress? Stress is defined as the force exerted per unit cross-section area on a body. There is different types of stress: tensile stress, compressive stress, and shear stress. Just imagine two equal magnitude of force are acted on the both sides of the metal rod. The outer part of the metal rod is experience tensile stress, which occur when two equal magnitude of force are moved apart each other and caused by stretching force, while the inner part of the metal rod is experience compressive stress, which occur when two equal magnitude of force directed toward from each other, which caused by compressive force. Formula of stress. Stress is equal to force that act perpendicular to its object divided by cross-sectional area of the object, while the unit of the stress is Newton per meter square or Pascal. Strain. What is strain? Strain is defined as the ratio of the amount of extension to its original length of the material. There is different types of strain: tensile strain, compressive strain, and shear strain. Tensile strain: if the length of the body increases under the action of the force, the strain caused is referred as tensile strain. While the compressive strain: if the length of the object decreases under the action of the force, the strain caused is referred as compressive strain. Here is the formula for the strain. Final length minus to its original length and divided by its original length, and strain has no unit. The concept of stress and strain is closely linked. The relationship between stress and strain can be described by using stress-strain curve. And this is the curve represent the stress and strain of the ductile material, like metal. From point O to A, the stress is directly proportional to the strain, which obeys the Hooke's law. At the point B, which is the elastic limit of the metal. Beyond point B to the point C, metal is permanently stressed and will never regain its original shape. When the stress is removed at point C, the metal has a permanent extension of OT, which means when the force is removed at point C, it will not return to point O. Point C is also known as U point, where the metal starts to deform plastically. At point D, the stress on metal is maximum. This stress is also known as breaking stress. If the stress applied continuous to point E, the point is breaking point. The metal will fracture.
Hello there, very good morning, afternoon or evening depending on when you're watching this. Today I'll be continuing stress and strain. Now you may have watched the stress and strain from one of my other classmates. Today I will be continuing that. So there may be some similarities here and there. So I'll be talking regarding on elasticity, okay? Now, the screen isn't the best quality, but I will probably read it out, okay? Now, elasticity. Elasticity is the property of a material which enables them to return to their original dimensions even after an applied force is removed. So basically, when you don't have any force, it goes back to its original dimensions. Now, in elasticity, we have two types of deformation. One of them is elastic. Elastic deformation, okay? This one. Elastic deformation is a material, material that returns to its original length even after being distorted. So this word here is distorted. Now, we will see distorted later on, so keep this in mind, okay? Distorted. Next up is plastic. Okay, sorry, my bad. Plastic Okay, plastic deformation. It is when a material that is deformed beyond its elastic limit. Now we have seen this elastic limit many times, haven't we? I'm sure everyone is well versed of where it comes from. Elastic edge. It's almost the same thing actually. So elastic really is similar to Hooke's law. If you understand Hooke's law, this should be pretty easy for you, okay? So basically, it is material that deformed beyond its elastic limit. Keep that in mind. Okay, now let's look at behaviors. Now, behaviors of deformation. Okay, now first thing, let's look at strength and stiffness. Okay, when you think of strength, I want you to think of something expanding. Like, is the amount of force you place on an object for it to expand. Okay, whereas stiffness, it depends on the material. Okay, the stiffer you are, the more it resists the amount of force you're putting. So if it's stiffer, then it will resist that force you're acting on it, and will go back, and it will return to its original position way faster. Okay, strength, expanding, stiffness, resisting. Okay. These two are something I want you to note on. This is for your strength. For your strength is something like expanding, the amount of force placing on something for it to expand. Whereas stiffness is something that resists the force you act on it. Okay? This resist and this expand. Okay, that is for that behavior. Now, another thing is the material, the type of material actually. This should be type of material. Type of material. Now we have two normal types. We have one is brittle and one is ductile. Okay. Now these are both tendencies of materials to when it's going to break. Now one thing to note that both of these materials do indeed break, and you will see this form of breaking by failure later on. So you will know this as failure. Okay, now we will see that later. Now, brittle and ductile. Okay, brittle, think of it as the tendency of a material to change its size and shape before breaking. Oh, my bad, sorry. Sorry. Let's look at ductility first, okay? It's easier to explain that. Okay, ductility is the tendency of an object to change its size and shape before deforming, whereas brittle, it straight away deforms. It doesn't do anything. So one thing, brittle, it straight away deforms. Okay, and your ductility, it undergoes changing your size and shape. So it basically undergoes a few distortions, and then it will go like few distortions, and then it deforms. So you can see that ductility has two processes. Okay, I'm not that good at writing in this, forgive me. Okay, we have those two. Okay, now let's have a look at elastic deformation. Okay, now elastic deformation. So now this is the stress and strain graph. I believe you have watched the previous video and are able to understand what stress and strain is. Okay, I hope you're okay with that. Okay, stress and strain graph, right? Now we have two types. One is linear and one is non-linear. Okay, linear basically means that the elongation of whatever object, it's directly proportionate towards the stress you're putting on. So it elongates proportionally, okay? And non-linear, I believe you guessed it, it increases non-linearly, obviously. So that sometimes it increases a lot, sometimes it increases a little. Okay, now if you see properly, the linear one has two arrows, right? One is the returning. This is the returning arrow here, and this is the going towards it. Now we'll look at non-linear graphs later on, so keep that in mind. Okay, non-linear elastic. Okay. Now let's have a look at its process. Right. Now this is the distortion I said previously. Okay. Initially we have these pack of atoms here, right? Now then they go under distortions. Now when we're looking at distortions, it's usually stretch shear. Okay, stretch and shear. Okay, for the elastic excuse me, elastic deformation, we're looking at stretch. Okay, you can see that it stretches, right? You can see the atoms properly stretch later on. So once it stretches, but once you remove your force, this is so, and then in this case you remove your force. I've removed. Okay, you remove your force. Okay. And then it goes back to its original position, right? So once you remove your force, it goes back originally. Okay, now that is for elastic. This is why elastic, it can go back to its position. Now let's have a look at the other one, plastic deformation. Okay, now plastic deformation, again another stress and strain graph. Okay, for this one, let us look at the atoms first, and then I'll explain the graph. Okay, now forgive my artistic skills, it's not the best, I believe, if you've noticed. Okay. In plastic deformation, you start off with atoms as usual, but in this case, it has both stretch and shear, as I've mentioned before. Now, stretch, you can see that it stretches, like a circle, so like some kind of oval, and then shears. Now, if you see the middle region, right, you can see that it's not going together with the previous slides. You can see it's sheared into 3 different regions, right? That's what shear is. So you put like some kind of barricades, right? So it cannot go back to its original position. Now, as you can see, once you remove your force here against F removed, okay, FR for short, right? F removed, you can see that it's no more stretched, but it's still sheared. That's why if you have a look at the graph just now, right? Okay, you can see that this region, it's going up. Then when you get rid of your force here, this is your force, you remove all your force, it tries to go back to its original position, but it can't, because it's sheared now. It's sheared, so it cannot go back here. It has to stop somewhere else because it can no longer go back to its original position. So that's why one important thing when it comes to plastic deformation is, I want you guys to write this. Plastic deformation, you can see I use air quotation, right? Plastic deformation. Plastic deformation also means permanent. It's a permanent deformation. Or in other words, you can also use irreversible. I'm not the best at this. This is irreversible and permanent, okay? Whereas you have your elastic deformation, this is known as a reversible. This is a reversible deformation. Okay, this is reversible for elastic, so it goes back to its original position. And for plastic, it's permanent and irreversible. It does not go back. Okay, that's for this piece. One minute. Okay, let me add in the next slide. This one. Beautiful. So, okay, let's look at this one. I'm sorry for the quality, but I will read it out properly so you understand what it is. Okay, you can see this one is the graph for brittle and ductile materials. Now, before I get into this, there are a few examples for brittle and ductile materials. So, for an example of brittle materials that I'm sure as everyone knows is glass. It straight away breaks. That's one thing. And ductile materials, this one is ductile materials, okay? Okay, ductile materials such as metals such as steel, copper, aluminium. These are examples of ductile materials, okay? Now let's look at the graph. Now, the quality is bad, sorry. You can see this one. Now this is the one that is rather linear, right? It's rather direct. It's rather proportional, right? This is known as the graph for brittle materials. Okay, I put it short form B, okay? So you can see that it immediately as failure. Now, I explained previously, failure basically means it breaks. It's breaking, so it breaks, okay? Now that's for brittle. Nothing much, not much to explain on it. Then let's have a look at the next one, also known as the ductile one. So this one I'll put as D, okay? D for ductility. Now, you have the thing called the yielding point, okay? Yielding point. Okay, this is the yielding point. Now, what happens at the yielding point is basically the stress, it grows very slowly. Now, you can see that it doesn't go as high as it went for the brittle one, right? You see, it grows slowly. And then we have this thing, okay, sorry, you can't read this, but this is necking. Okay, I'll write that in. Necking. And what necking basically is, okay, I have a few pictures here. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not the best at drawing. Okay, let's say you have a cylinder, right? Okay, this is its original position. Then you add in some force. When you add in some force, you can see that it elongates, right? It elongates a little, it goes longer. Okay, now when you add a little more, it starts to hit its limit, right? It starts to hit its limit, then you can see that this is known as necking. Now, for an example, okay, if you can understand my drawing, take an hourglass, for example. Hourglass has that similar shape. Okay, now hourglass is not an example of deformation. No, I'm just giving an example of a shape. That's that shape there, an hourglass shape. And this part is known as the necking. Okay? Okay, next. Okay, remember that how I said about non-linear elastic deformation, right? I didn't draw the going back arrow, I just draw the going towards arrow, right? Now it certainly goes back, but there you can see in this graph there is a big difference from this. You increasing the stress and you reducing the stress. You can see there's a big difference, right? You can see this area shaded in. Now this shaded area is also known as the Hysteresis Loop. Okay, let me spell that out for you. Hysteresis Loop, H-Y-S-T-E-R-E-S-I-S. Hysteresis Loop. Okay, this loop shows the energy lost in form of heat dissipation. Now you don't have to worry too much of this graph because we don't have any derivative for this chapter. It's not in our syllabus, so don't focus too much on this graph. Okay, next. Okay, before we end off our session here, I have a few simple examples I'd like to talk about. Okay, this one. Which material is more elastic here? Steel and rubber. Now, I want you to think a little here. Honestly, I'm sure most of you have chosen rubber, right? Even I would have chosen rubber, honestly. People would have chosen rubber. But this is one big problem here. Rubber is not more elastic than steel. Okay, let's have a look here. In physics, elasticity is defined as the tendency of an object to return to its original position the fastest. Now, key point is the fastest. How fast it goes back. Now that's how we know more elastic. Therefore, in this case, what I've written here is which one is more resistant towards the deforming force. Okay, so basically, you take steel and rubber of the same diameter, radius, length, volume, area, same thing. Take steel. Now, if you were to pull apart like a steel object, right? Now it will certainly elongate, right? However, it won't elongate much. Maybe up to here. Let's elongate a little. It won't elongate much, but it certainly elongates, right? Now this, and then once you release all the force, it'll go back to its original position. So that's because we know that it's very resistant towards that deforming force there, because this is the deforming force you add. The force you add on is basically the deforming force. Okay. Next, if you have that same piece for rubber and you put in on your deforming force, you can see that rubber expands a lot, and I mean a lot, right? And then once you remove the force, obviously it goes back really fast, but since it expanded a lot, you can see that it has to cover, there's more thing for it to cover, right? So we can tell that steel certainly has a faster resistance over that. So that's why when it comes to more elastic materials, we have to choose steel. Steel is more elastic, okay? Okay. Keep that in mind. Okay. Next. Okay. If the material recovers the original dimensions when an external load is removed, this deformation is known as blank deformation. Now, so from this question, we know that it recovers its original dimensions. There's only one type of deformation known as elastic deformation. Now, as I've said before, so let's look for elastic. There, you can see elastic, right? Okay, what does elastic mean again? Elastic means reversible. Okay, I can draw this, but this is reversible. Whereas, on the other hand, we have plastic. Plastic is known as permanent there. But you can also say permanent is irreversible. Okay, there's that ir there, so that means it's not reversible. So therefore, we can say for sure that the answer for this one has to be C, because we want something that goes back to its original position. So that's to be C there. Right? Now, our last question. Which of these two graphs represents a brittle material? Now, I believe, okay, I'll give you some time. Can you tell me which one? A or B? A? Did I hit A? Okay, A. The answer is A actually. You can see why, because we want a brittle point. If you choose this graph, you can see that there's the yielding point somewhere around here. And then you have that necking. If you choose brittle, it straight has that failure. I mean, both graphs have failure. But how we notice it's a brittle one? Because it doesn't have the yielding point, nor does it have the necking. So that's how you tell the difference between brittle and ductile graphs. Okay. Well, that's all for my session today actually. So I hope you enjoyed this class. So I'll be seeing you off. Okay, thank you. That's all for me.